People say revenge is best served on a cold plate. But real payback? It's rarely about screaming or throwing words around. Often, it's just a silent beat, one simple choice so heavy it actually rattles the foundation of an entire game to its core. For Caitlin Clark, getting even didn't require a shouting match or some viral angry tweet on social media. Her version of revenge was just one word. She walked away from a $1 million payday for a mere 8 weeks of work on the court. It looked like easy cash on the surface. Dig deeper though, and it was the perfect screw you. See, that contract wasn't just business, it was a lifeline tossed her way by the same man who once pushed her aside. He'd belittled her, treated her like a nobody, and tried to act like she was just another face in a crowd of players he'd already seen 1,000 times before. When she finally turned him down, it wasn't just a simple rejection. It was a direct hit to the pride of a man who genuinely believed he could never be humbled by anyone. Forget the stats and the trophies for a second. This isn't just about another highlight reel or some box score. This is about power. It's about the old-school gatekeepers realizing, maybe for the first time ever, that the game doesn't actually revolve around them anymore. Talk about an ego trip. A legend was so stuck on himself he couldn't even see the future standing right there in front of him. And then came the moment that Future decided she didn't need him, not for a chance, not for a check, and certainly not for his validation. Caitlin Clark's story isn't just about hoops, it's about the entire power structure of the sport flipping on its head. It's about snatching the spotlight away from the people who thought they were going to own it for the rest of time. It was quiet, brutal, and perfectly timed. One no that cost millions of dollars and left a massive legacy looking like a total mess. This wasn't some random accident. Every eye roll and every "she's okay" but comment built up to this very second. The best part? Clark didn't even have to scheme for her payback. She just kept doing her thing, shattering records until the guy who ignored her as a teen came crawling back with a contract in his hand. When that moment finally arrived, she didn't even blink. Get ready. This story is way bigger than basketball, rivalries, or even a 7-figure payday. This is the real, gritty story of how Caitlin Clark didn't just walk away. She completely shook the foundation of a basketball legend's world with one single devastating word. You know, every epic payback story starts with a massive blunder. For Geno Auriemma, it wasn't a bad play or a tough loss, it was something much worse than that. It was a total blind spot, a choice that would end up haunting him in ways he never saw coming. Before she was the global icon selling out massive arenas and shattering every TV record in the book long before the Rookie of the Year award, she was just a kid from Iowa with a huge dream. For her, like many others, that dream was spelled with 4 specific letters. UCONN. Caitlin admitted it. UConn wasn't just another school, it was the ultimate peak of the sport. It was the place every girl wanted to go, the factory where legends like Diana Taurasi and Maya Moore were carved out of stone. To Clark, it was the summit. She flat out said, "I loved UConn." She thought they were the coolest thing on the planet, so the next step seemed like a total no-brainer. You have the most insane scorer of a generation, practically knocking on the door of the sport's biggest recruiter. It should have been perfect. Except when she looked at UConn, they didn't even bother to look back at her. According to Clark, the interest just wasn't mutual at all. Geno's staff made a few lazy calls to her coach, but the man himself? He never even bothered to pick up the phone. No calls to her, no talks with her parents, nothing. The silence was loud and clear. He just didn't care enough. And his excuse later? It was a total masterclass in pure arrogance. He claimed he'd already committed to Paige Buchers and didn't want 2 point guards on the floor at the same time. Sounds reasonable, right? But then he added a little extra spice that turned a simple reason into a total insult. Geno basically said if she wanted in so bad, she should have called him. Just think about that for a second. The most successful recruiter the sport has ever seen, a man famous for hunting down talent before they even hit high school, looked at a future icon, shrugged his shoulders, and then had the nerve to blame a kid for not chasing him. That wasn't just a mistake or a missed chance. It was straight-up disrespect. And while he was playing it cool, Clark was watching and taking notes. She knew exactly where she stood. She wasn't the priority or the hand-picked star in his eyes. In his head, she wasn't UConn material, so the king of the sport just shut the door on her. Looking back, he should have ripped that door down to get her in, because she wasn't just some prospect. Forget the comparisons to Paige or Diana. This girl was a whole different species. A once-in-a-lifetime firestorm just waiting for a spark. Too bad Geno didn't see the light until everything was already scorched. She picked Iowa, no championship banners, no legendary aura, and zero history. But they handed her the one thing Geno withheld: genuine faith. That single choice to head for the cornfields shifted the very foundations of the game forever. See that initial snub? It turned into the costliest blunder anyone has ever made in the women's game. We aren't just talking about lost games. Think millions in revenue, a massive fan base, and a spotlight that UConn will never reclaim. Back when she signed with the Hawkeyes, nobody realized they were witnessing the start of an actual uprising. Most folks figured it was just a backup plan. I mean, let's be real, Iowa wasn't some powerhouse dynasty like UConn. It wasn't the school kids plastered all over their walls at night. But tradition? That wasn't what drove her. She wanted total freedom, not being someone's backup or just another cog in a coach's machine. At Iowa, she wasn't just a prospect. She was the focal point. Right out of the gate, she owned that court in a way UConn's strict culture never would have permitted. It began quietly. Sold-out arenas and viral clips that set the internet on fire. Those deep threes weren't just lucky, they were warnings. Each long-distance missile she launched signaled a new era. She wasn't just along for the ride, she was the driver. While Geno guarded his old fortress, Clark was out there constructing her own kingdom, shot by shot. The stats were insane. Capacity crowds became the norm. Every stadium she visited essentially turned into a temple for her talent. It felt like a stadium tour. People showed up just to see the show, even if they had to root against their hometown. Broadcast ratings just kept smashing every old record. Channels that used to skip the women's game were suddenly obsessed because she wasn't just a player, she was a cultural phenomenon. Look, none of this was luck. She didn't just trip into fame. She dragged it into reality by force. She didn't require UConn's trophies for validation. Geno's blessing? She couldn't care less about it. She spun Iowa's modest resources into pure gold. All the while, Geno could only watch from the sidelines. Instead of admitting he missed the boat on a generational talent, he doubled down on his pride rather than being honest. Instead of giving her credit as the face of basketball, he tried to act like her success wasn't a big deal. He pretended he'd seen it all before. Tried to sell the idea that this was normal. But the world knew better. This was different. While UConn obsessed over its past glories, she was busy reinventing what it actually means to dominate. Winning wasn't enough. She was flipping the script on fame, finance, and influence across the entire industry. Suddenly, kids weren't wishing for that UConn jersey. They wanted the 22 across their back. That's the one thing Geno couldn't manipulate. Sure, you can brush off an athlete if you want, belittle the numbers, treat her like a nobody, but you can't kill the hope of millions who actually believe in her. By the moment her influence exploded past Iowa and took over the national conversation, hitting global news and the pro leagues, Geno's snide remarks started sounding less like expert critique and more like petty jealousy. What he once brushed off as a minor scouting error was becoming a public disaster, a constant reminder that his authority had evaporated. Quote, as her legacy grew, his stature seemed to shrink. Geno kept his mouth shut for a bit. He had the chance to just own the error. He could have admitted they dropped the ball while praising her magic. A little grace would have gone a long way for his reputation. But humility? That's not in his DNA. He started talking, and every time her name surfaced, he reverted to his usual tricks. He'd offer a tiny compliment, but always buried inside a subtle insult. When reporters asked, he'd just lean back and smirk, calling her fearless like some child playing in their driveway. It sounds nice on the surface, right? But think about it. In his mind, she wasn't some legendary phenom. She was just a girl playing games. He tried to make her world-class skill look like something completely average. It didn't end there either. Every time someone tried to praise her uniqueness, he'd drag her back down with lazy comparisons. Like clockwork, he'd always steer the conversation back to Paige Buchers. If you called Clark tough, he'd claim Paige was too. Every bit of praise was just a way to shift the spotlight back. In his reality, only UConn players truly mattered. And make no mistake, that narrative was entirely intentional. It was a tactical, silent grab for power aimed at steering the public conversation. If Clark's success was just business as usual, Geno could still act like the kingmaker, pretending her spotlight was just a byproduct of the dynasty he built. Backhanded compliments have a glaring flaw. They are obvious. People caught on. The fans certainly did. Pundits saw it. Rival coaches saw it. The mask was far too thin for anyone to miss. They saw a man unable to give credit without a catch, always needing a lead role. And the more he poked, the more desperate he looked. Look, Clark's game spoke for itself. Her brilliance did not need these petty little comparisons to balance things out. She was dropping numbers that defied logic, shattering records weekly and outdrawing massive professional franchises. Yet, there was Geno, white-knuckling his throne, desperate to remind everyone who was still the boss. It was subtle, sure, but telling. Behind the fake grins and hollow praise, something ugly was brewing. Pure insecurity. That specific panic that hits when you realize the world is moving on and you are powerless to stop it. Eventually, the facade just cracked. Those quiet jabs and little sly remarks were not cutting it anymore. Geno shifted from throwing shade at Clark to launching haymakers at the actual people rooting for her. For a minute, Geno played it cool. A little dig here, a small comparison there, nothing too loud. But the dam finally broke. The praise dried up, the mask fell, and what was left was just raw, unmasked frustration. In June of 2024, during an interview on The Dan Patrick Show, Geno Auriemma finally did the unthinkable. He did not just target Caitlin Clark. He went for the jugular of her entire fanbase. Just let that sink in. We are talking about a Hall of Famer here. A guy with a dozen rings who supposedly defines the peak of coaching excellence. Instead of showing a little class or embracing the fire Clark brought to the game, he insulted the very lifeblood of the sport. It was brutal. Honestly, mean. He called her fans delusional, claimed they were clueless, even saying they were so stupid they gave the sport a bad name. And why? Because they believed. Because they thought a rookie like Caitlin Clark could actually finish top 4 in MVP voting. To him, that was a joke. Clark's fans were not seen as passionate. In his eyes, they were just an annoying problem. Suddenly, Geno stepped over a line he could never uncross. This was no longer about basketball strategy or stats. This was not some expert breakdown of a player's game. No, this was a personal vendetta. It was a direct slap in the face to millions of new fans Clark brought into the fold. Families filling seats, kids in jerseys, and casual fans watching for the first time just to see the magic for themselves. Make no mistake, this was not just some random opinion. This was Geno Auriemma, and his words carried weight. People listen when he talks. That is why those insults were so damaging and so incredibly revealing. By labeling those fans delusional, he was not just mocking them, he was betting against her talent. He was basically saying, "The hype is fake. You people do not know ball. Just wait, I will be proven right." But here is the kicker. He was not right. Not even close. And Caitlin? She did not say a single word. No cryptic posts, no angry rants. She did not need them. She had a much better weapon in her arsenal. The hardwood. And her play on that court did more than shut Geno up, it made him look foolish. She dominated. Won Rookie of the Year. Nabbed first-team All-WNBA honors without breaking a sweat. When the MVP votes dropped, she finished exactly 4th, right where her so-called delusional fans predicted. It was more than a win. It was a total wrecking ball to Geno's ego. Every dig and arrogant quote just dissolved the moment reality hit. Now, that attack on the fans looks like one of the biggest whiffs in sports history. The legendary gatekeeper was exposed for what he was, bitter and totally out of touch. Worst of all, it was a self-inflicted wound. Clark's win was not just for her, it was for everyone who believed. For every fan he mocked, every kid he called crazy, and every supporter he labeled as stupid. As Clark kept winning, the truth was obvious. Geno did not hate the fans for being wrong. He hated them because they were right. Revenge usually involves shouting and public drama, does it not? But Caitlin Clark's payback? It was dead silent. That silence hit harder than any comeback. She did not address the insults or the delusional labels. No social media wars, no drama. She just went back to doing what she does best, playing ball. Her performance on that court basically turned every single one of his critiques into a massive punchline. See, while he was hitting the talk show circuit downplaying her, she was out there rewriting the entire history of the game. Every night, she dropped stats that made the veterans look like amateurs. We are talking three-pointers from the logo, crossovers that left girls frozen in place, and assists that stayed on highlight reels for weeks. She wasn't just surviving that first year, she was absolutely owning it. And when the trophies started stacking up, they told the whole story for her. Rookie of the Year, All-WNBA First Team, and the kicker finishing 4th place in the MVP voting. Right where those crazy fans said she would be. There is a certain beauty in that, right? Without ever opening her mouth, she and her supporters completely gutted his reputation. He called them clueless. She made them look like prophets. He claimed they did not get the game. She proved they understood it way better than he did. It was almost like poetry. Every bucket she made was a silent rebuttal. Every milestone she crushed was a clapback. Every sold-out stadium was a loud reminder that this wasn't just noise, it was the new reality. As she climbed higher, his words started smelling like sour milk. What used to sound like authority suddenly just sounded like pure saltiness. What once felt like wisdom now looked a lot like insecurity. He tried to act like the grand gatekeeper, the legendary wise man of basketball. But her game made him look exactly like what he was, an old-timer stuck in the past, watching the world move on without him. The funniest part? She didn't even care about revenge. She was not playing for his sake. She wasn't looking for his blessing. She wasn't even trying to win an argument. She was just being herself. And by doing that, she stripped him bare without even trying. That is the magic of silent revenge. No screaming, no drama. Just results. And she delivered them so hard that there was nowhere left for him to hide. By the time her first year ended, the conversation wasn't about whether she had lived up to the hype anymore. It was about how thoroughly she had burned every doubt to the ground. For him, there wasn't a single exit strategy left. Every jab and every insult he had thrown at her fans came back like a boomerang, hitting him right in the teeth. The man who thought he was royalty had been humbled. And the girl who did it? She never even had to raise her voice. For most of us, getting proven wrong is the end of it. You take the loss, you move on, and you stop picking a fight. But for a guy like him, letting go wasn't on the table, because at this point it wasn't just about her as a player. It was about what she stood for. A total shift in power, a reminder that the sport he had ruled for decades no longer revolved around him. Instead of accepting the new world, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He kept talking. Every interview, every radio spot, every podcast, her name was never far from his lips. He was obsessed. And the pattern was always the same. A tiny bit of praise, but keep it tight. A compliment with a but attached. A small nod followed by a low blow. But then he went even further. He stopped just talking about her game and tried to claim he owned her whole movement. In one wild interview, he acted like the boom in the women's game was something he and his era had built. He claimed this surge wasn't even about her. Nope. According to him, the world just hopped on her back after people like him had done all the heavy lifting for years. Just think about that. He refused to say she was the one dragging the sport to new heights. He claimed the sport was already on its way up, and the media just used her to get a better seat. The sheer audacity of it is wild. In that one moment, he showed everyone exactly what his problem really was. It wasn't about the ball, or even about her. It was about control, the power to decide who gets to be the hero. The power to keep the spotlight on himself. Even as the fans looked elsewhere, he had to remind us all that he was the architect. He needed to be the boss. Like if she was a rocket, then he was the only reason she had a place to launch from. But here is the truth. She didn't ride anyone else's wave. She was the damn tsunami. The system didn't lift her up. She broke it. She never asked for anyone's permission to be a star. She built her own stage, and the entire world followed her lead. That is what made his obsession so painfully obvious. He couldn't stop mentioning her because he couldn't stand being a footnote in her story. Every viral clip, every record, every sold-out stadium, it was just another sign that she was doing it without him, without his school, and without his blessing. So he just kept yapping. And the more he spoke, the more the truth came out for everyone to see. She wasn't just dominating the court anymore, she was living in his head, rent-free. But words can only take you so far. Before long, he hit a wall where talking didn't cut it. He needed to actually do something. He was desperate for Clark's stamp of approval, trying to hitch her star power to something with his own fingerprints on it. That's why that $1 million deal happened. By now, Geno Auriemma had already thrown every punch in the book. He'd ignored Caitlin Clark, he'd insulted her entire fanbase. He'd even tried to twist the narrative, using those classic backhanded compliments to keep her in her place. When that fell flat, he tried to claim her success was just a byproduct of the system he built. Didn't work. Clark soared while Geno started fading out. And as Geno slipped into the background, a new door opened. This felt like his big comeback, a shot to prove he wasn't just a coach but a visionary, a businessman, the ultimate power broker of the sport's future. They called the project Unrivaled. It was a daring 3-on-3 league started by Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, with Geno's DNA all over the foundation. The league had the cash, it had the buzz, it had the drive, but it was missing a soul, a face. That's where the desperation really started to show. Despite the heavy hitters and the big promises of innovation, only one player could actually make it legit. Just one name had the pull to bring in the millions of new fans who were just starting to watch the game. Only one star was bright enough to put that entire league on her back: Caitlin Clark. So, after years of talking down to her, Geno finally swallowed his pride. He reached out. Word got out that Unrivaled threw a massive offer at Clark over $1 million for a tiny 8-week season. We're talking one of the biggest paydays ever seen in the history of women's hoops. Look at the irony. The guy who wouldn't even pick up the phone when she was in high school was now begging her to save him with $1 million check. The coach who told everyone the hype wasn't real? Yeah, he was suddenly trying to turn a profit on that exact same hype. He called her fans delusional, but now he was praying those same people would buy tickets and save his bottom line. It was a total flip. A role reversal so wild you couldn't even write it for a movie. Geno went from being the gatekeeper to a simple salesman, from kingmaker to beggar. The whole future of his vision, maybe even his legacy, was sitting right in the hands of the girl he once ignored. Don't get it twisted, this wasn't just about business, it was deeply personal. If he got Clark, he could fix the story. He could say, "She's one of us, she's in the system, she isn't bigger than the game I am." But there was a catch. When that contract hit Clark's desk, she didn't see a golden opportunity. She saw a trap, a desperate power grab from a man who spent years trying to make her look small. And her response? It was the perfect kind of payback. That $1 million offer was supposed to be Geno's big win, his lifeline to take back the narrative and tie himself to the biggest star in the world. He had the league ready, he had the stage. He just needed Caitlin Clark's signature to make it all real. But Clark didn't save him. She buried him. Her answer was simple. No. No excuses, no back and forth, no second guessing. Just a single word that carried more weight than every insult and interview Geno had ever given. Let's be clear, this wasn't just a financial move, it was personal. By saying no, she wasn't just walking away from a contract, she was rejecting him, his approval, and his entire way of doing things. That no was a loud message. I don't need you. I don't need your league. I don't need your stamp of approval. I built this empire without your help, and I'll be fine long after you're gone. For Geno, the embarrassment was absolute. Think about it. The man who couldn't be bothered to call her once was now offering over $1 million. And she turned him down in front of the whole world. No drama, no bitterness, just a quiet, cold rejection. The fallout was devastating. Without Clark, Unrivaled lost its gravity, its main draw, its identity. That $1 million check wasn't just money. It was a white flag. An admission that they needed her way more than she needed them. When she walked away, the hype just evaporated. Fans saw it for what it truly was, the ultimate ego death for Geno. The internet went wild, roasting Geno for thinking Clark would actually bail him out after all those years of disrespect. He thought they were playing chess, but Clark ended the game in one move. She didn't scream. She didn't argue or give some big speech about respect. She just moved on. That silence hurt way more than words ever could. Truth is, Geno's era is over. His grip on the game is gone. Caitlin Clark didn't just take the crown. She set the whole throne on fire. Now, the story isn't about whether Geno feels regret. Of course he does. But the real question is much bigger than him. What happens when an entire generation of coaches and power brokers realize they've lost their grip? Because Clark's rejection? That was way more than just some personal victory. It was a total shock to the system, proving to the old school that the game belongs to a new breed now. Players who don't ask to shine. Talent that doesn't crave some dusty gatekeeper's seal of approval. Stars building their own empires from zero, ready to walk away from $1 million checks without even flinching. Geno was just the first to get schooled like that. He won't be the last. Maybe the old cliches are broken. Maybe revenge isn't best when it's cold. Maybe the sweetest kind is served quietly with a simple no. It's the knowledge that the person who once doubted you now needs you. And Caitlin Clark? She pulled off that move with total, brutal elegance. Look, this was never about some $1 million payout. It wasn't even really about the contract itself. It wasn't just a feud between a coach and a player. This was about who actually holds the keys to women's basketball. For decades, Geno Auriemma and his inner circle were the gods of the game. They were the ultimate gatekeepers. They dictated the rules. You wanted greatness? You had to crawl through them first. That was just the law of the game. But Caitlin Clark just torched that rulebook. She didn't need UConn's banners to tell the world who she was. She didn't need a legend's blessing to dominate. She wasn't following their script, she was busy writing her own. By saying no thanks to the man who once looked past her, she proved something absolutely massive. The era of the gatekeeper is over. The athletes are the ones holding all the cards now. That's exactly why this story stings so much for Geno. His mistake wasn't just ignoring Clark when she was a teenager, it was believing the sport could never move forward without him. And now the whole world is watching him slowly fade into the background while the game grows larger than he ever imagined, all without his fingerprints being anywhere near it. Clark's no wasn't just about personal payback. It was a total cultural shift, a jagged line drawn between the past and what's coming next. It was a warning to every coach and executive who still thinks they can dictate how the story ends. Those days are dead. This generation doesn't ask for permission, and they sure as hell aren't begging for respect anymore. They've got the fans, the viral numbers, and the pure leverage to own their own destiny. And Caitlin Clark? She just showed everyone how it's done. No shouting matches, no arguing, no demanding anything. She just kept winning, kept growing, and kept building her own world. And when the moment arrived to show who was actually in charge, it only took one word. One rejection that sent shockwaves through the sport. So forget asking if Geno has regrets. We already know he does. The real question is, who's next? Who is the next gatekeeper to underestimate this new generation only to realize, way too late, that the game has completely passed them by? The warning shot has already been fired. Caitlin Clark delivered it quietly, decisively, and with perfect aim. The future of the game is finally here, and it doesn't ask for a single favor,